What happens when belief has no limits? Because belief is powerful, it gives people purpose, direction, meaning. But what happens when belief goes too far? When it's no longer questioned, no longer controlled, no longer grounded in reality? What happens when someone doesn't just follow a belief, but becomes consumed by it? That's where Hidan exists. Not just as a fighter, not just as a member of the Akatsuki, but as something far more dangerous. A person who believes without limits. Hidan isn't driven by revenge. He isn't chasing power. He isn't trying to fix the world like others in the Akatsuki. His motivation is much simpler and much more terrifying. He believes in destruction, completely, without doubt, without hesitation, without reflection. And that's what separates him from everyone else. Because most people, even the most dangerous ones, have a reason behind what they do, a goal, a philosophy, a justification that can be understood, even if it's not agreed with. But Hidan, he doesn't need justification. His belief is the justification. His actions don't need meaning, because in his mind, they already have it. And that's where things become dangerous, because when belief replaces thinking, there's no room for doubt, no room for growth, no room for change. Hidan doesn't question himself. He doesn't reflect on his actions. He doesn't consider consequences in a moral sense. To him, everything he does is right, simply because he believes it is. And that kind of mindset removes one of the most important human traits, self-awareness. Because self-awareness is what allows people to evolve, to question their beliefs, to recognize when they're wrong, to grow beyond who they used to be. But Hidan rejects all of that. He exists in a state of absolute certainty, and that certainty is what makes him so extreme. But here's where his psychology goes even deeper. Because Hidan doesn't just believe in destruction, he enjoys it. Not just the act of causing pain, but the experience of it. Because pain to him isn't something to avoid. It's something to embrace, something to celebrate, something that connects him even more to his belief system. And his immortality plays a huge role in this. Because when you can't die, when pain doesn't have lasting consequences, your relationship with suffering changes completely. For most people, pain is a signal, a warning, something to avoid because it threatens your survival. But for Hidan, survival is guaranteed, which means pain loses its meaning as a threat and becomes something else entirely, a form of expression, a form of devotion, a form of identity. And that's where the line between belief and chaos disappears. Because without the fear of consequences, and without the ability to question his own actions, Hidan becomes unpredictable. Not because he's strategic, but because he's unrestrained. His actions aren't guided by logic, they're guided by belief alone. And belief without limits can justify anything. That's the danger of extremism, not just in fiction, but in reality. Because when someone believes their perspective is absolute, when they see no need to question it, they stop listening, they stop learning, they stop evolving, and at that point, their actions are no longer controlled by reason, but by conviction alone. And conviction without reflection is one of the most dangerous forces that exists. Hidan represents that perfectly. He's not trying to convince others. He's not trying to prove anything. He's not even trying to build something greater. He simply exists within his belief and acts on it without hesitation. And that's what makes him so different from someone like Pain, who believes suffering leads to peace, or Madara Uchiha, who believes control leads to unity. They have systems, ideologies, goals that can be debated. Hidan doesn't debate. He doesn't analyze. He doesn't question. He acts. And in that sense, he represents the extreme end of belief, the point where belief stops being a guide and becomes a prison. Because even though Hidan appears free, doing whatever he wants, following his beliefs without restriction, he's actually the opposite. He's trapped in a mindset that doesn't allow growth, trapped in a belief system that defines every action he takes, trapped in a cycle where nothing changes because nothing is questioned. And that's the irony. Because true freedom doesn't come from believing without limits. It comes from being able to question those beliefs, to reflect, to evolve, something Hidan will never do. And that's why his immortality matters so much, because it symbolizes more than just physical survival. It represents a mindset that never changes, a belief that never evolves, a person who will remain exactly the same no matter how much time passes. And while that might seem powerful, it's actually a limitation. Because growth requires change, and change requires doubt. Something Hidan has completely removed from his life. So now the question becomes, if you believe something so strongly that you never questioned it, would that make you powerful or dangerous? Because belief can guide you, but without limits, it can also consume you. And once it does, there's no one left to stop it.